Hey everyone, and welcome to another Sasquatch Theory Bigfoot interview. In this video we have Ryan from Alaska, and he wanted to share his experiences with all of us and the reason why he became a Sasquatch researcher. A lot of non-believers don't understand why someone would want to go looking for Bigfoot, but if you experience the things we have, you would understand, and it's something that gets in your blood. You will think about these experiences over and over for the rest of your life. Even if a person has an experience or an encounter and decides not to share it with anyone, it's something that you will always have to think about in your mind. I was able to relate with Ryan and his experiences because I have had the same things happen to me here in Missouri, so I was actually amazed to hear about it, and it made me feel good to meet someone new who described the same type of activity up north. Ryan has been doing research with Fred Roll, and he is pretty much his right-hand man when it comes to taking Bigfoot reports and following up in active areas. Ryan is a tech-savvy researcher who is not afraid to get out in the woods and get his hands dirty. I was surprised he was not afraid of exploring the forest by himself despite the dangers that lurk within its boundaries. During our expedition, Ryan would take off by himself in grizzly bear territory with his dog Brutus, and they came across several grizzlies and were able to stick together and keep their cool. I trust Ryan, and he seems to be a very genuine person who is eager to search for the truth. If you guys enjoy listening to Sasquatch Theory, please like and subscribe to the channel. And if you have a Bigfoot encounter that you would like to share with me, please contact me sometime at sasquatchtheory@outlook.com. All right, Ryan, welcome to Sasquatch Theory. Glad to have you on. It's been amazing adventuring around Alaska. If you would, tell me a little bit about your encounters and experiences. Where did this all begin for you?
First big one happened for me on the northern part of the Matsu Valley. I was hiking next to a creek, and it's a pretty shallow creek. There's a spot to cross with four-wheelers, and I had a set of muck boots, and I wanted to try and find a spot that was shallow enough I could cross with my muck boots. And so I took the dogs for a hike, and it was probably about 6 in the evening. It was just nice. I got back from work. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna go take the dogs for a walk. I haven't been to this spot before. Check it out. So parked the car. We went east on the creek about half a mile until I ran into somebody's cabin. You know, beautiful area. Little bit of moose sign, bear sign, just looking for like a little bit wider like sandbar to cross. Couldn't find it, so I came back and started going west from where I parked the car relative to the trail system. And about a half mile west of there, I was just following like the ridge line above the creek at this point, just because there was so much water from the creek that it was impassable. And we're going along the ridge line, and we're about 100 yards from the creek. There's a decent amount of brush. You can't actually see the creek. You can still hear it. It's fairly loud. We decided to take a break because, you know, it had been about an hour and a half walk, and I had my 2 dogs. I had my 1 shepherd. He's here with me now, Brutus, and then Keen. And I heard a whistle off to my left. So we're headed west. Creek's over here, and I hear this whistle. We were there like maybe 2 or 3 minutes taking a break, hear this whistle, and I was like, well, that's kind of weird, you know, but I didn't really think anything of it, you know, whatever. And so I'm like, well, that's a good excuse to just keep going. So I got up, we continued along the game trail, and I want to say within maybe 2 minutes, we heard a second whistle, and the second whistle came from, like, we're on this ridge line, you know, and there's a game trail, and it goes down about 10 feet, and it kind of curves around to the right, about 100, 150 yards ahead of me, to kind of open up into this swampy area. And this second whistle comes in, and it comes in from my 11 o'clock underneath the ridge where it curves around, and there's, you know, a lot of brush around. Not a lot of visibility. You could see about 40, 50 feet in this particular spot. And I was like, well, that's kind of weird. So I stopped and I waited, and the wind was variable. The wind was changing directions. Initially, it was kind of blowing towards where this whistle was, and I figured, well, I could hear something moving in the brush, and I just stopped and waited, and I was like, well, that's weird, because I could hear this, whatever it was, moving through the brush.
So it's kind of following you.
Well, it was coming in.
Okay,
Like
it's coming at you.
that was the weird part. So I stopped and I was listening, and I could hear this thing coming in, and the wind changed and was blowing towards it. And I was like, okay, if it's a bear, it's going to go, it's going to change direction because it's going to smell me. The dogs are wet at this point because they've been running in the water. They stink. We probably both stink. Anyway, so the wind changes and it's like blowing directly at it, and it keeps coming in, and I'm listening, and I listened for another 30 seconds or so, and it's continuing to disturb the brush. Can't hear any, steps or anything like that, but I can hear like the brush, moving up against something, like it's being disturbed. So then there's a little bit of a clearing to my right, and I'm like, okay, so I'll get off the game trail in case it's a bear, and maybe we'll get a bear photo. The dogs are really good about recall. They've been around bears before. So we moved to the right. We moved to the edge of the tree line, which was, I want to say, close to 25, 30 feet away. And we just sit there. I wanted to have a little bit of cover. That way, if I needed to back, behind a tree, if the bear got, spicy, it wouldn't be an issue. And we waited, and as we moved, the sound changed direction, it's like it was anticipating where we were moving to, because I, recalled the dogs. They usually stick pretty close, but I was like, I snapped my finger. I'm like, okay, let's go. And so we go to the edge of the tree line, and this sound comes, it's like it comes up the ridge, and there's a lot of brush in its direction. And I want to say it's probably about 40 feet, 50 feet away at this point. Still don't see anything. It's like, masking behind the brush kind of thing, but it parallels me going up the ridge. So it's like it came up the little hump of the ridge and came in behind the brush and was paralleling me as I went to this little kind of tree line. And there's, next to this tree line, further to the west, it opens up a little bit. A while back, someone had cleared a lot at one point. They were, I don't know, going to build a cabin or something, but they had pushed a bunch of stumps and topsoil into the center of this lot. And this brush line that this noise was behind meets up with the back side of this little hump. So as I'm moving to the right, it's moving with me. And right about when it gets behind the hump, the wind had started changing direction and blowing back towards us. Like it was going this way, then it was going back way. So it was going east and west, and it was weird. But at that point, when the wind changed directions, the dogs, I was watching this thing, or I wasn't watching it, but I was listening to the sound, and I'm just kind of observing, and it gets behind this hump, and at that point, the dogs basically left. Like I was paying too much attention to the sound to notice the dogs left. There was a little game trail, and the dogs just followed the game trail, and they went about 50 feet down this game trail that was on the opposite side of that little brush line that I had kind of walked up against. And so this lot hadn't been messed with for years, and so there was about 8-foot willows, stuff like that, and tons of leaves. The leaves hadn't fallen off yet at this point. It was getting closer to the fall, but they hadn't changed colors yet. And so you couldn't see across this lot. You could see the hump. You could see where there was a bunch of brush growing up out of it. But this sound, it went behind the hump. And when it went behind the hump and the dogs left, I got this really weird vibe. And I'm like, well, that's very strange behavior for a bear, because it's already winded me. And so I'm like, okay, the dogs left. The dogs never leave me, right? They're always right close, within line of sight. But they're on this game trail. I can barely see them. It's like they went to where they could see me, and they're watching me, and they're watching the sound, right? And so I'm like, okay, I'm going with the dogs. This is weird. screw the photo. So as I'm like turned sideways, and so I'm looking at the dogs, checking the dogs, and then I'm looking back at this where this noise is. It starts moving to the right behind all these saplings and kind of parallels me on this game trail. And this area had some. It was designated. Some of the areas, parts of it, were designated for firewood removal, so people could come in and cut down trees. So there were like little tiny 40 or 50 foot wide spots where it was cleared of trees for firewood. And so I start walking. The game trail leads back to a four-wheeler trail that connects into one of these clearings. So I follow the dogs. The dogs keep going ahead of me. They go to like the next spruce tree, and they're watching me, right, as I'm going out. And this noise, it stays off to my left, probably like 8 o'clock-ish. And it's close enough, and it's making enough noise in the brush that I can tell that it's, it wasn't breaking sticks, but I could tell like something was moving, and it was relatively large. And it paralleled me all the way out till this gravel pit that had been cleared out, that they used like as a quarry for, building the road out there or something. The dogs, when I caught up to the dogs in the gravel pit, they were in the center of the pit, and they were staring at this one spot. There's the four-wheeler trail. I'd gotten back to the four-wheeler trail, and I followed the four-wheeler trail out. And the whole time this sound to the left of me is paralleling me out. And I'm looking there. I'm looking at the sound. I'm trying to spot it, but it's real thick spruce, like real thick. It's like, this stuff, but, well, you've been there. You've seen it. You've videoed it. You just can't see past like maybe 10 feet. And so this sounded like it was about 30, 40 feet away, and it paralleled me all the way out to the gravel pit. I got to the gravel pit. The sound stopped. I saw the dogs in the center of the gravel pit. And so they were both hackled up, and they were staring, alerted at one spot in the gravel pit. And so across this gravel pit, I get to the dogs in the center, and they're like, oh, you're here. They kind of relax a little bit, but they're still alerted and hackled up looking at this one spot. And you've got like a bluff where they took material out, and then there's a little four-wheeler trail that comes into the gravel pit, and it's kind of in a depression. And so the ridge goes up about 10 feet. You can four-wheeler through or take a truck through to get firewood. But there was about a, 50-foot spruce tree. There's, pretty significant size spruce tree. And both of the dogs are staring at this one tree. And there was, of course, a bunch of brush, but that one stood out to me. And at this point, it was dusk. You couldn't see into the tree line. It was dark enough to not see through the tree line. So I get to the dogs, and they're alerted, like just pointing straight at this thing. And I'm like, okay, I'll light it up with the flashlight on my rifle. So I have just lit it up with the tree line with the light, went back and forth. And when I lit it up with the light, I didn't see any eye shine, anything like that, but I could hear a shuffling behind the ridge. And it moved from left to right. And it was about maybe 50 feet on the ridge. And then I didn't hear it anymore, and then the dogs slowly relaxed. And when the dogs started playing with each other and stuff like that, I was like, okay, that's weird. But they were just calmed down again. And I checked behind me. I didn't see anything. And this is all in about a minute's time or less, that I get to the gravel pit. I go to the center. I light up the tree line. The sound behind me stops. I hear this sound in front of me. So the feeling that I got from the whole situation was like it was kind of like I was being pushed into something else. And it was just it was an uncanny feeling. It was very odd. Other than the two whistles and the brush movement, I didn't see anything. I didn't hear any vocalizations, nothing like that. We went through the gap in the gravel pit. There's a little creek behind it. We go through the creek, we go back to my car, and we leave. And then I was kind of in shock for like 3 days. Like, I just had to process it. It wasn't something, like, I've been stalked by black bears before when I was a kid, like, non-issue. It's a bear. You watch the body language. If the bear's like locked in on you, you got a problem. Otherwise, they just want to sniff you, figure out what you are, and you make noise, and, hopefully you have a dog,
Right.
that has good recall.
Yeah,
But
they'll alert you for sure. So you
yeah.
feel like this creature or these creatures were kind of pushing you towards an area, either
So
to get you out of there or to get
I,
you into some type of
after I kind
situation.
of processed it, I slept on it. The feeling that I got was that I was getting pushed out of the area, and the impression I got this impression that it was very distinct. It was like when you're in the kitchen and you're stealing a cookie from the cookie jar and your mom is mad at you, you know, that kind of feeling of like, you know, you did something that you should be ashamed of. That was the feeling I got out of the whole situation, which was just totally off the wall. You know, you're like, where does that come from?
Right.
But that was like after I didn't work for like 3 days. I just took the time off, didn't answer my phone after that, and it was very strange.
Yeah.
And like I was amped up, but I knew not to run. I was like, okay, so if it's a bear, I'm not going to try and, you know, get away from it. It was a totally different feeling, and I can't name that feeling. It was just very peculiar. And I mean, I could tell I was being watched. You know, you get that heebie-jeebie kind of feeling of, you know, hey, somebody's, you know, there. But it was strange, man. And then 10 days later, I was restoring a Polaris four-wheeler, like an old two-stroke four-wheeler, and I finally got it all done, and it was great. So I'm like, you know, screw it, I'm going to go for a hike. So the next time I go out, there's a trail system on the kind of opposite side of the valley from where this happened, across the creek, and it's about 1.5 miles, 2 miles as the crow flies. But I take my four-wheeler out, I take Brutus with me, and there's a trail system. There's like all these meadows where the moose and the bears like to get into the berries and all the goodies. And there's this big ridge that's about 150 feet high, and there's a trail on that ridge with a bunch of tree stands. So I'm like, I'll go map all the tree stands. It'll be fun. So I had never been on this trail. We fart out. We go as far as we can on the four-wheeler, and then we bushwhack. And I go to the end of this ridge line, and at the end of this ridge line, it drops down into the valley that has a little creek in it. And the creek or the valley where the depression where the water's eating out is like maybe 150 yards wide in total. It's a real small creek, like might not even support fish, like it's that small. So we go down there and we're bushwhacking, and it's kind of nice. It switches from spruce into birch and aspen, so it's kind of real meadowy underneath. There's a lot of moss. It's kind of cool. There's like shade, and just it's neat. It's nice and quiet down there. There was tons of birds and, you know, bird song. And we get down there, and I'm just farting around with the dog. There was an old mining claim there, so there was some mining equipment. That was kind of cool to find. And so it's about 150 feet on this side, and it's fairly steep. Like, it takes you about 5 minutes to get down it. You have to pick your way, you know, use a stick or something, or just go tree to tree. It's like it's steep enough for that. So we make it down, and we're farting around down there. And I want to say about 20 minutes into this, after we had finished like walking around and stuff, just checking it all out, there's an opposite ridge, and it goes up it's a much shallower ridge, and it goes up about 60, 70 feet in elevation. And there's, you know, of course, brush and trees and stuff. So you can see a decent amount on the high cover. So where the birch trees are, you can see pretty far. And then the spruce trees kind of start, and so you lose visibility. And on this right side, again, I hear this almost exact same whistle that I hear 10 days before. And this one was fairly sharp, and so I'm looking up the creek. We're on the left side of the creek. The creek's here, and then the ridge goes up. And I couldn't put a distance on it, but it was close enough to where it was loud. Hear this first whistle, and then down the valley where the creek is. This valley is pretty long, and it eventually peters out. The ridgeline goes down, but on the left side of the creek, so if I'm facing up the creek, I hear a second whistle almost immediately after the first one. And then a third whistle in the meadows are over here on the left past, there's like a tree line, the birch end and then the spruce start and then the berries. There's like a meadow with a bunch of berries in it. There's a ton of bear trails and stuff like that through it where the bears eat the berries every year. Just, it's really beautiful. But just to the left of that meadow, I hear the third whistle. So it was like boom, boom, and then over here. And my four-wheeler is over this direction. It's to the right of the meadow. It's like in between the second and third whistle. And I hear that, like my face like goes, I know that I just was like adrenaline, max adrenaline. And I was just like, okay, we're leaving. And I immediately start plodding. I go to the edge of the meadow, cross part of the meadow. And as I'm crossing this meadow on the far end, there's some spruce trees. And at one point I hear something move just a little bit, but I looked and I didn't see anything, and I'm looking for bear, I'm looking for everything. But the whistles had me concerned because I had just had it was like fresh, I was still kind of getting over it. And similar feeling of super anxiety, adrenaline, like, okay, we need to leave. I get to the edge of the bluff where you got to climb up, and I climbed at a different spot than I came down because it was more open. There were more birch trees in this spot, so I had better visibility. And I was like, I'm not getting ambushed by anything. So we start making zigzags, and it takes us, maybe 5-7 minutes to get up the hill. But I'm always checking behind me. I'm checking where I heard the noises. And after I get about halfway up the hill, I didn't hear any more brush, nothing. I get back to the wheeler and we get out of there. And that was pretty much it. But the whistling, man, it was real short, and it was like a low tone and then a high tone. So it was like, whoosh. I can't do it, but it was
like a
yeah, but it was two tones. So
yeah,
it was like
dual toned whistle.
Yeah.
And they triangulated around you.
Yeah.
So one whistled, then another one whistles, then another one.
Yeah.
And yeah, that same incident happened to me in Missouri, and it really freaked me out because I thought someone was watching me, and I don't know. It was very unusual because I was staring into the brush and I couldn't see what it was or who it was.
Yeah.
And then for me, when I went back an hour later, I seen these two orange orbs floating through the woods. So the night got even stranger after that.
Oh.
Yeah. What was your impression? Like, what was your feeling whenever you heard these three whistles? Like what'd you
it's
think was
time
happening?
to leave.
Yeah.
That was my big thing because it wasn't aggression, but it was just like that first experience. It was like whatever it was just like, just go, get out of here, like go away. This was more of an alert thing. And because I was, kind of surrounded, I had a river to my back, this creek. I was right on the edge of a river that this creek fed into. So I couldn't go the opposite direction.
Right.
I had to pick a direction. I'm like, I'm going to the most open spot that I can get to with the best visibility. And so I went there, and then I just kept going to different areas where I had good visibility to see all around me. And I didn't care how much noise I made. I just went there, And so I stayed out of the bush lines. I stayed in the open and tried to do that as much as possible. And luckily, the top of the ridge is all like birch stuff. So you can see down all the way down the ridge line. So I wasn't super freaked out once I got up the ridgeline. I was watching behind me just in case to my right, the one that was kind of in the center came up. I didn't hear anything, but I just, situation awareness. I'm looking around, checking everything out. Mm-hmm. And it was, oddly, even though I got surrounded, it was less shocking than the first time because, I had experienced it. I had kind of processed it. And it was like, okay, this is what it is. I'm kind of surrounded. I need to leave. That was the math on it, So I went back to the wheeler, and funnily enough, the spot that I parked the wheeler had this tree that was twisted about 5 feet up, and it was twisted about 180 degrees and then broken down, and it stuck out at like a, 120 degree angle kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I think the tree was dead at that point, but that was just a note of I got back to the four-wheeler and there's this broken tree in front of me, and reading into all this kind of stuff, that's a thing. and with the twisting of the tree, and the breaks, now I kind of pay attention to that. And so when I'm in areas where I see a lot of that, my situational awareness goes up,
You've been whistled at several times, and you've been thinking about what happened. It kind of got the gears turning. What else happened after that?
So in this same area, there's tons of trails. And so it's a ton of fun to just hike and, go spruce hen hunting. I mean, there's moose out there. There's all sorts of critters. It's a remote area in Alaska. There's not a lot of traffic. There's, locals four-wheel back there and for firewood, stuff like that. This is another area that has a few designated firewood spots. The next summer, me and a buddy, Cyrus, and his girlfriend, we go four-wheeling out there, and we go four-wheeling out pretty late. We just got his four-wheeler fixed, and we're like, screw it, we're going for a ride. We got lights. I mean, I got a night vision, and, we'll take it. We'll have some fun. And so, again, I'm like, hey, let's go down this side trail. I've never been down to these other bait stations. Let's check out these other bait station trails. I didn't know it was a bait station. I'm just like, hey, there's like 3 or 4 offshoots. Let's go check them out. So we're going down all these trails, and by this time it's dark, like it's dark. And we go to this one bait station, and we decide, let's take a break. Let's get some snacks, get some water. So we're there like 5 minutes. And it's dark, so there's no bird song, but we finish, messing around, checking out the bait station, all the stuff, that was left there, just checking it out, seeing if there, been bears checking on it, stuff like that, because there's tons of bears out there, like tons of bears. And I'm getting ready to get back on my four-wheeler, and I was taking that 252 stroke, and it's loud. Like, it's a loud machine. Like, it's pretty rowdy. It's a lot of fun to ride. But I had my Comtac electronic, shooting earmuff. Mm-hmm. So I could hear, I could turn it way up. So if I was spooking a critter, like let's say you spook a moose as you're coming around a corner, I want to be able to hear them break in the brush. And it's easier to hear that with the electronic earmuff, So I can turn that up. I can hear critters around me. You have better situational awareness while you're riding. At least it seems worth to me, and you're saving your ears. And so I go to put them on, and I turn them on, and I can hear whispering, and it sounds like almost like a domestic dispute. It's like there's a male and a female arguing over something, and it's a real weird. It was like, you could hear the male tone, and then you could hear the lighter female tone, but you could tell, like, if a really big person tries to whisper, but they're trying to, like, you're trying to argue with someone whispering, like you're like, that it escalates, it goes from whispering to almost talking. And that's, I was like, well, what is this? So I listened to that for about 30 seconds, and that's exactly what it sounds like, is a domestic argument where the male and the female are fighting, but they're whispering, trying to be quiet. And so I'm like, Cyrus, come over here and listen to this. And unfortunately, when I said that, I took my contacts off, I handed it to him. I'm like, I point him, I'm like, oh, over here, listen straight over there. But it had stopped. And so it had rained earlier that day. And so there was rain on the leaves and stuff. And there was a decent amount of like moisture on the trail and stuff. So we're like, well, let's go. It's kind of weird. I had told him about my experience the year before, like shortly. He came over to visit because he was like calling me, and I wasn't taking any calls in that like 3 or 4 day period while I was recovering. And so he came over, and I explained the whole thing to him in like an hour. And so he knew what I experienced, and we were all like, no, let's get out of here. So we leave, and this bait station is kind of in a little bit of a depression, and the trail goes out and it goes up a hill. And so I'm like, you know what? Let's just stop and listen again at the top of the hill. We got decent visibility. I mean, it is at night, but so we shut the machines off, and we're listening again. We stand on the wheelers and we're just turning around listening. And about 30 feet off the trail to our right, one of the trees, it's like something like just bonked the tree real quick, and all of the water off all the leaves fell down to the ground. Didn't hear anything else, but it was just like, like somebody, you bonk a tree and then all the water falls on you. People that have hiked, if you touch a tree when there's fresh rain, you're going to get all wet. And it sounded exactly like that. It all came down, and that was only like 30 feet off the trail. And we were all like, nope, let's get out of here. Let's not make any more stops. Let's just go home. It's enough shenanigans. And so we went home, and that was it.
Yeah. That kind of makes me feel like there's like a supernatural aspect behind it. I don't know, people talk about invisibility, cloaking. They're just the masters of the forest, I guess.
The weird part is these sounds, like the masking with the terrain and the brush, unless this thing was like down on the ground crawling or something. I mean, yeah, I know the brush was like 8 feet tall in my first experience, so you can't really see through it. I mean, there was just a ton of the brush there. But I was looking like directly, I'm like listening, I'm side-eyeing this spot where I can hear this thing, and I don't see anything. The brush doesn't move. Now, it was obviously behind that brush line, so it wasn't disturbing it. But, yeah, there's just the odd feeling. Like if it was just a critter, like why would I get these just weird vibes from it? I can't explain that,
Yeah. Yeah, it's strange.
It's very weird, and I don't know. I can't explain that.
Right. So you've had a few strange things happen, and then at what point did you contact Fred Roll from Subarctic
So
Alaska Sasquatch?
it was, I believe it was the summer. It was the late summer, shortly before my first experience. So this friend of mine has an airstrip. It's an abandoned airstrip. It's unmaintained, so we use it for shooting. And a buddy of mine in the lower 48, he makes plate carriers and tactical gear, and so he sent me some stuff for testing. And I'm there, I'm setting up the plate carrier. I've got both of the dogs with me, and I'm going to take them for a hike after this. So I set up the plate carrier, and it takes about 5 minutes to put the thing together because he sent it to me in pieces. So there's a 55-gallon drum, and I've got my back turned, and there's a ridge line where you shoot into, and there's a bunch of trees and stuff. And I didn't really think anything of it, but I'm sitting there playing with it, and I get this feeling that a real strong feeling that I'm being watched. And I'm putting the plate carrier together. I'm ignoring that feeling that I'm being watched. And then when I turn around, I put the plate carrier on, I turn around, and I'm getting ready to grab a rifle to, do some shooting. I wanted to, test zero some stuff. And I hear a whistle from the hill, and I'm like, well, that's weird. Getting the feeling of being watched, and then another one of these whistles, the same whistle that I heard later. But I kind of discounted it. But I called Fred, and I'm like, hey, I found his channel, because I looked for like, what could be whistling in the woods, and then I find all these people in the lower 48 talking about these things whistling at them. So then I look up Fred, find his channel, and so I call him up. Well, I emailed him. I'm like, hey, I need to, pick your brain about some stuff. And so I invite him to lunch, and, I picked his brain for like an hour just because I had a feeling. And I don't know. It was very uncanny and strange. But I hiked, like I purposefully walked up the hill, that ridge line, and hiked that ridge line where the whistle came from, near the shooting pit. Didn't see or hear anything. It was totally uneventful hike. Didn't have any weird feelings. But I was like, after the end of that hike, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to try and find somebody. And so I looked Fred up, and, we kind of became friends eventually. But, I took him to dinner, and I'm like, picked his brain about these things, like what's the behavior, what is the deal, and then later that fall, to get paced out, it was strange, and it was the same. It was almost the exact same whistle every time. This other area where the airstrip is about. It's 8 miles south of my first encounter, because I don't really consider the whistle like an encounter. It was just, I got whistled at. I had a weird vibe of being watched. I just wanted to ask questions, like, what is the deal with this? And then it just so happens something else came up later. When I was a kid, me and my buddy, we would go spruce hen hunting behind my grandmother's house, and it's next to a major river, and there's this one ridge line above the river where there's lots of gravel, and I want to say we were like 14 or 15, and we're going along this ridge line, and down by the river we hear a tree get pushed over, and that, like, I kind of go through all my experiences in my mind of the stuff that's happened in the woods. I think that was probably my first time, because we thought it was a bear, but I've never heard of a bear pushing a tree. Like, I've heard of bears like scratching on trees, and yeah, they'll like push on a tree, but this was, we could even see the tree, like it was a full healthy birch tree, and this thing goes down. Now we could only see parts of the tree, right? But we hear it, and we turn our heads and we see it, and we hear it crash, and we're like, well, what is that? And we just figured it was a big bear being territorial. It heard us up on the ridge line. It was like, get out of here. I didn't know at the time.
Yeah,
but
that's what they do.
I think that was the first time that I ever had an, quote unquote interaction, even though it was just a tree getting pushed over, and then the whistling. Then I talked to Fred, and then probably 2 or 3 months after I talked to Fred, getting whistled and paced out,
Yeah.
It's hard to explain it here because it's different terrain, but it's a little bit steeper. But
Yeah, it is.
this is the ridge line that you had to climb up was even steeper than this on the second encounter. I mean, it was, of course, it had lots of trees on it, so you could go tree to tree and kind of work your way up and zigzag. But yeah, that's it. And
You told me there's a lady named Carol. She contacted me, and I talked to her for a while, and I told her, hey, I know someone up there in Alaska that might be able to help you out. And she got in contact with Fred. He told me that you guys went out there and did some investigating, found some tracks, and she had some strange stuff going on.
We had some. So by the time we got there, the tracks had deteriorated quite a bit. So, I mean, there was still like an impression, but it was indistinct. It had rained so many times, or like the snow melt or something had just disturbed it. But while we were there, we were parked, and Carol had made us dinner, and she's like, hey, there's something outside. Let's, what was that? And so we go to the window, and so to me, it was like a golf ball sized orb. It was off-white in color, and it had like this, like the effect of a mirage on the horizon, kind of the heat shimmering. So the light that it put out didn't illuminate anything around it. This is like dinner time. It's kind of a little bit darker, but it's still twilight. Like, you'd be considered, almost daytime for you guys. Like, so anyway, we see this orb. Fred goes outside to chase it.
Yeah.
But we see this orb, and it just floats. It goes out by the outhouse, and then there's like a pile of debris and stuff. It goes behind, and it kind of goes, there's like aspen trees sticking up, so there's not a lot of foliage immediately in her yard. It's a little bit open, but there's still a lot of like the trees themselves. And so this thing like goes into the trees, and Fred goes and stands on the pile of debris and is like looking, but I watch this thing. I grab my rifle was right next to the door, because it's Copper River, there's bears everywhere, you never know. You take a firearm to the outhouse, that kind of thing. So, this orb kind of goes through the woods, and it's kind of doing this float. It's just real slow, floaty. And it was about, the whole thing was maybe 30 seconds, that we see this. And the feeling, again, coming back to the feeling that I get from it, it was like checking us out. It's like, oh, there's strangers here visiting her. It's going to check us out. Strange cars, strange people. That was the feeling that I got from it. I didn't really get super heebie-jeebies. I didn't feel threatened. It was just curious. That's what I got from that one. We went camping later that same summer with Cyrus. We went out to the end of the trail system where I had my 2 encounters, and we camped like at the end of the trail. There's a swamp where it opens up, and we heard a little bit of weird murmuring, like almost someone coddling a baby. Didn't hear the baby, but we heard the murmuring of the mother type of thing. We could hear this kind of echoing across the swamp. And, I can't necessarily dismiss it as a moose. It was just kind of creepy sounding, and it went on for about 15, 20 seconds. And then we decided to go for a hike. And we're bushwhacking kind of on the trail. We're going to the other end of the swamp. And I look back at our camp, like you can just barely see, we had a little bit of a fire going so it would illuminate part of the swamp. And so there was like a curve in the swamp, and we're going around that curve, and I'm just looking back to see if I can see anything. And out of the corner of my eye, I see another orb, and it was almost the same color. It was like an off-white, and I see it. My eyes turn. I look at it, and then it's like it notices that I noticed it, and it zips, and it goes about 6 feet and disappears. So that was the second one. And from that one, I can't explain the feeling I got from it, but it was different from the first one. Like the first one was just curious, like, hey, who's these people here, The second one, it was different. I don't know how to explain that, but
Do you feel like it's tied in with the Sasquatch activity?
We had tracks within 150 yards of where that second orb experience was. We had tracks, like the thing almost flew over the tracks at Carroll's, almost flew right over them. And then another thing at Carroll's is we found these 2 willow trees where, when you have like crop circles and the corn will be bent over, it won't be broken, but it'll be bent. Well, at the ground, right where they come out, and they were only like maybe an inch in diameter, maybe 1.25 inches in diameter. These 2 little willow bushes, they were bent at the ground and crossed each other like this, like real low to the ground, like 4 inches above the ground. They were still alive, and that was just another odd thing. And just kind of weird vibes there at Carroll's. We checked out a couple of other spots, and you just get a feeling, there's a feeling in the air, like you step in out of one place and into another, and you can even pass through these areas. And I've learned to listen to that kind of feeling that you get. And I don't know if it's just your sense of being watched. It's a little bit different from that, but the atmosphere changes. And so I've learned to listen to that, and I think it's both a defense mechanism that's built into us, maybe genetically, and I think there's like a sixth sense type of thing going on. I definitely think there's weird stuff that happens. Like I get weird vibes sometimes in some of these areas for no reason, and it's not like you get watched by a bear or followed or circled by a bear. It's like, yeah, it's a bear. It's exciting. You get an adrenaline dump when there's a bear 20 feet away, which I just had day before yesterday. But, it's a strange feeling. I can't explain it, but there is definitely something weird going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's your goal here in the future? You've purchased some gear, some drones, some night vision, some thermal, audio recorders. Do you and Fred plan on going out to these areas and investigating?
Yeah, so after my second encounter and then the orb thing at Carroll's, like my curiosity, like I'm like, this is next level, you know? It's like an addiction, you know, like an adrenaline junkie. The curiosity drives me to explore. So I'll go to an area, I'll map all the trails, I'll look for sign, I'll look for areas that I get a weird feeling, and I'll determine, okay, is that from a bear being there? Am I, subconsciously smelling a bear? Is the bear looking at me? Or is it something else? And I've learned that there's a difference between a bear or a predator or a moose and these things, that you get a little bit different vibe.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But it's a curiosity, absolutely. And I guess I'm driven to, get footage. Like it would be really exciting for me to be able to get footage or even like audio. But
I think you have a good chance living up here in Alaska.
yeah, and especially these areas like the murmuring. I wish I could have gotten that on a recording, but I could only hear it through that electronic earmuff. It was so low that I had that thing maxed out, So maybe it'll happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going out as much as I can. I've got the dogs. I've got an excuse to work the dogs. And
Fred's good at accumulating the stories. You're a tech guy. You're really good with technology. And I'm sure you guys have other people that kind of join up with you guys, and everybody has a little bit of something to offer. So that's good. Hopefully you guys can help people out around here. A lot of people get laughed at, thrown aside, dismissed, and it's kind of embarrassing, to even talk about this with people.
I want to normalize it because I had an experience and it was shocking and it changed my life. Like, I enjoyed going out and four-wheeling and running with taking the dogs out, mountain biking, bushwhacking, all that kind of stuff. But now I'm like driven, I got this curiosity that bit me and I got to know, what is this phenomenon?
You got bit by the hairy man bug.
Yeah, and it changes your life, Oh,
yeah.
I don't think I've lost any friends over it because I just matter-of-factly own it. I'm like, this is what happened. I don't know what to tell you,
Everyone that we've spoken to out here, and we've mentioned the hairy man, they're like, oh yeah, the hairy man.
Yeah.
They either know someone who has seen it, or they've heard stories about it, or they've seen stuff
or
themselves.
they've heard stuff,
Oh, yeah.
I'm just here I want to normalize it, It would be really cool. I've got that thermal with me all the time, and it's real quick to fire it up. Like with the bear encounter, I got the bear on thermal, which, I'll give to you. But, it would be really cool to get something like this on thermal if it would allow it to happen. But it seems like these things are slippery, man. They are. They're absolutely
right place, right time, man.
They're absolutely the king of hide and seek.
Yeah. They call them wood buggers where I'm from.
Yeah.
Yeah. But this is an amazing area. I mean, we're literally on top of the world here.
I'm glad you got to come. I haven't been here since I was a kid, and it's just amazing. I love it.
And there's been reports around here lately. Somebody had an encounter about a mile or two where we're at, or probably in this area. It's hard to say.
Yep.
But yeah, the view out here is phenomenal. Get some Brutus.
He's very photogenic.
Yeah, he knows I'm filming.
Or you found a wishbone stick? Yeah.
All right, Ryan, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with me here on Sasquatch Theory, and you did an excellent job. Let's be sure to give Ryan a like and let him know in the comments how much we want to thank him for making this trip possible. Ryan picked me up and dropped me off at the airport, and he even let me crash at his house on the last night. Ryan helped a lot with everything, and I was certainly in good company. I was surprised when Ryan talked about the 3 whistles he heard because I experienced the same exact thing here in Missouri. Long story short, I basically stopped at the top of my forested driveway one day after coming back from the grocery store to check my trail cameras, and whenever I was standing by my car, something whistled to my left. A few seconds later, something whistled right in front of me that sounded like it was dual-toned, and then to my right, a few seconds later, something else whistled. So it was 3 different individuals, and at that time I had no idea Sasquatch whistled like that. And it blew my mind when I heard a woman from the Himalayan mountains claim she encountered a Yeti and it whistled at her in the same manner. At the time, I had no idea that Bigfoot would whistle at people until I started researching the topic and listened to other people's testimonies. If you look at some of the Native American totem poles of the hairy man, it looks like they are whistling. Their lips are kind of puckered up, and if you try to whistle, that's what it looks like. Alright, I appreciate everyone for watching the video today, and hopefully I can get back up to Alaska to do more research with Fred Roll and Ryan and the rest of the group. If you have a Sasquatch or cryptid encounter that you would like to share with me here on the channel, please contact me at sasquatchtheory@outlook.com. If you guys can, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Take care and be safe, everyone. God bless.